So welcome back to the podcast that isn't a podcast, that is kind of ASMR, that feels like a podcast but isn't either of those things. I hope everyone's doing well, having a good day, a good week. I've been kind of more so all over the place as of recently. I think in the previous episode, I said my week was very clustered. I can't really think of the right word to explain it, but I felt burnt out, to put simply. And that is definitely traversed over into this week. And I've took, I guess, a lot of steps to try and rectify it to any sort of decent degree to allow me to create content and to feel productive. But a lot of the actions I took weren't necessarily the best, and they felt more so redundant in the long term of things. And now I'm kind of in this position where I'm like, I want to work and I want to be creative, but I genuinely just can't find the creative passion or strive to want to sit down for 10 to 15 hours to think of an idea, to record it, to edit it, to put it all together within a video, and hopefully it does well. Does that make sense? And I have these thoughts rather often. Well, this is getting very kind of loaded straight from the beginning. I apologize, but that's kind of been my mindset as of recently. And it's definitely been more so overwhelming for myself. I've receded back to this state of not really wanting to do anything. And I'm the type of person that wants to do everything. I'm the type of person that overworks themselves probably way too much, and it can be very detrimental. At this point, at least within the past couple of days, I've been taking smaller steps to try and rectify it again, to hopefully make it a little bit easier. And if you haven't noticed, specific things have helped kind of flare up that creativity once again. Small things. I recently changed my banners on YouTube and Twitter to like a singular butterfly that I kind of conceptually created and conjured up. It's very simplistic, but I found it very cute, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna run with this. I like it. I like this whole butterfly aesthetic era that I'm going into, and it looks nice on thumbnails. And then I changed my whole thumbnail aesthetic to something a lot more simplified that I really enjoy, kind of using a lot more red because I really like the overly red and white aesthetic. And that has most definitely helped building that creative emphasis once again. Stuff like that probably seems really trivial for a lot of you, but for myself, it helps quite a lot. And it sparks that creativity that I need at least a portion of every single day, so I can not find myself in this weird like rut, like I'm running in place, which is just annoying. But with all of that, I am of course very grateful for all of the amazing words and supports and kindness that people show me on my videos. I try not to let numbers control my approach to videos and storytelling formats and explaining different things and hypotheticals, theories, etc., but there's always like this 5 to 10% chance that it does, and it comes through every once in a while. I think that's a pretty common thing for every YouTuber. When a video doesn't do well, especially one that you're really excited to push out and show the world, it can be pretty hurtful. It's probably not the best word to use, but it just takes any sort of encouragement that you have or any sort of anticipation or hype that you have for yourself and kind of belittles it quite a bit. And it's nothing to do with the people that watch the videos. It's nothing to do with the hatred that video may even generate potentially, but more so you kind of expect it to fit within the algorithm a bit better. You expect it to do a certain type of numbers, and I would recommend never looking at YouTube that type of way where it's a numbers game. But not only do you sometimes have to obviously keep yourself afloat and relevant for the most part, but also for your own mental state, it's not something that you should do and try to avoid as best as possible, even though it will happen. It's definitely one of those things that comes back every so often. But I do love and appreciate all the kind words. Like, I go through the podcast video comments, see a lot of very kind words. When I am personally in a bit of a slump, creatively, emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever it may be, I kind of go through the comments and I'll look through those kind-hearted regards, and it uplifts me a little bit. It helps out most definitely. So it gives me a little bit of a push to continue creating content. Not like I would ever really quit, but also give me that extra push to like, okay, stop being lazy, stop being kind of bogged down and within this mental state, and try and push through it as best you can. Definitely easier said than done though. But I do apologize for that very overwhelming start. Hopefully it's not too personal where it turns you off or you don't want to listen to it, but I completely understand if that is the case. I think I kind of treat these as like therapeutic sessions where I kind of can spill out a portion of my thoughts at the beginning of these, just to kind of build or bridge some sort of relatability between myself and all of you. I guess that's the downside of not really having much of a personality within my videos and not really showcasing that on the channel. But if you go over to my Twitter, that's a bit of a different story. It's not all too much either, but if you do send me anything, whether it be a DM or you tweet at me or send me some sort of fan art, I'll always respond with obviously some like nice words thanking you for all of the support and my appreciation for it, but a funny cat picture that I like. It's just something about those cat pictures that I love. And I have a whole folder of like 500 plus different variations of cat faces and everything in between. I've built a very weird reputation in only replying with cat photos to some sort of skewered aspect, which to me I absolutely love. I find it funny. I also do want to apologize if this video is a little bit shorter than usual. I don't really have all too many questions to go through. I had some other stuff I wanted to talk about, but I'm not entirely sure how to frame it. If I think about it while recording this, obviously I'll go through it and talk about it, but I'm not entirely sure. There isn't all too many questions being asked within the comments, and look, I ain't trying to attack you, I ain't blaming you, but to make it a little bit easier to incentivize some sort of question, don't ask me a question, but more so just a singular topic that you feel like you would like for me to talk about. I think that's a better way to go about it. Instead of a question which is phrased down to like this thing that I may or may not can even answer, I think a generalized topic is not only a lot more interesting, but I can branch off into any direction for it. So it might be music within games, or it might just be music in general, or it might be your most memorable moment for manga, or an art style that appeals to you. Those are questions, but more so just topical things that can branch off endlessly. And I could probably talk about for a very long time. So if you have anything that is along those lines, topic based, maybe some unique or interesting curveballs within those topics, definitely let me know. It's hard to talk about specific series just because I may or may not have read them. So I understand like asking that question isn't going to be filled all too much with a response, because the likelihood of me reading that series or even potentially wanting to talk about it is far or few between. But here's the first question. Context is a continuation of a previous question in the last video I done regarding my own manga and how I would write something along those lines. What things would I value or favor into a story that I was thinking about trying to do? It'd be cool to hear if you've had anything in particular that you've had resting in your mind in regards to telling my own story. I think when it comes to storytelling of any kind, I think of more so novels, books, etc. and telling a story through that medium. As much as I would love to do some sort of comic or manga and being able to visualize it in my head, relying on another person to try and mimic that visualization doesn't really seem all too fair for them. I may be able to see something in my mind perfectly with how I want this character to speak or this beautiful scenery, but if I get an artist to try and replicate that, I don't expect them to get it 100%, nor do I want them to feel bad about not getting it 100%. Does that make sense? And of course, that's a whole different thing in terms of business and paying someone to obviously help you do that and being within the same mindset. I think that's probably an important relationship to have with an artist if you're trying to create a manga. So I would love if I could be as experienced and put enough time and effort and creativity into drawing the things that I would want to draw and how to visualize it. But obviously I'm not that talented in that regard. And these people be working for years on years to perfect their craft. So manga is more so out of the picture, but when it comes to novels and just books in general, I have thought of a lot of stories, or more so the conceptual work for them. Nothing inherently fundamental or something with a solid foundation, but just bits and pieces sewn together to what I would feel to be an interesting experience. Do I want to reveal any of those things? Not... Not entirely. The stories I write, or I think about, I should say, aren't necessarily for the lighthearted. They're very usually maybe not sickening, but can be rather nauseating to read or even just to visualize, because the stories that I enjoy writing is kind of mixing psychological horror with a lot of mundane or real world issues. Obviously giving and paying a lot of respect to those real world issues, whether it be mental health, deep rooted emotions or trauma, etc., anything along those lines. That's the primary most important thing. But then mixing it with this psychological horror aspect can be very overwhelming for people to read, and is definitely a specific genre, which, you know, psychological horror is a genre in itself. If you aren't necessarily into that type of stuff, it may fall onto that sickening regard. It's kind of hard to talk about stories that I would want to write, but hopefully that visualizes the way I would want to go about it. Something that's very in-depth and pays a lot of respect to those real-world issues, while hopefully bringing in some unique or very interesting psychological horror aspect to it. And there's so many incredible things you can do conceptually with that, which leads you down this rabbit hole of an abundance of ideas that just overflow, to be entirely honest. I will say this, however, just to kind of have people thinking about something. I have a title for something that I'm theoretically working on. It's more of like a bunch or a mixture of differing ideas. And the title of the work is called Trauma Service. That's it. That's all I'm going to give. I don't know if I would ever release it. I don't know if it would ever be finished in some sort of respectable amount of time, but if I do release something, ever like a short story, and if I'm feeling creative and inspired enough to fully put my time and effort into it, I would most likely release it with that title, or even something along those lines. Moving on, what would you say your goals or mindset coming into adulthood or like post-high school age was? Bonus question, what is your favorite food? Or the most important question first, favorite food? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if I have like a favorite food like rice. That sounds really boring. I apologize. That sounds really boring, but I mean, I just enjoy rice with anything. Like any sort of sushi or sashimi or just rice meals in general, like a curry or something. Like, I don't know, rice just is like the perfect combination for anything. Honestly, I could probably eat seasoned rice on its own. I'm trying to think of like a specific meal that sticks out in my mind other than sushi. Maybe like lasagna, which I don't really eat all too often, but it is very nice. Caesar salad is really nice too, actually, now that I think about it. And I feel like I haven't had it for years, but like a chicken Caesar salad. That sounds nice. I feel like I want to buy one now. But goals and mindset coming into adulthood or post-high school. You're not wrong, this is kind of personal. I guess live, it sounds very broad and odd to say, but not more so in the sense of going out and doing things and living up your life, which is perfectly fine to have, but I think finding the enjoyment within it. High school for me was honestly pretty boring. I knew a lot of people, had a lot of friends, so to speak. But even while in high school, I was kind of working on and off and was already kind of one step out of the whole high school mentality, which is a massive jump. It's very different. And by the time I fully left school many years ago, I was kind of just straight into work or straight into finding something that I wanted to do. And it wouldn't take me all too long to kind of detour into YouTube and to being creative. Obviously, I had some pretty weird and massive hurdles within that time period, but just enjoying life, I think, was the biggest thing. And kind of adopting the very simplistic and kind of cringy, quirky motto that I run myself by now, which is no past, no future. All I'll say in that regard is thinking about that helped a lot. So I don't really worry all too much about the past. What's in the past is in the past, and whatever is in the future, I'll get to when I get there. It was hard to kind of fall into that mindset, but worthwhile. Hopefully that's a somewhat acceptable answer for that question. But moving on. Thoughts on the big three shonen, One Piece, Bleach, and Naruto. Fun fact, when I first started my channel, I used to talk about all three of these series. For a lot of you, you probably don't remember. I think for many individuals, especially within my era, early 2000s, late 90s, if you're born within this space, you most likely find yourself conforming around these three series. That and most likely Dragon Ball and Hunter x Hunter. But these three were obviously the pinnacle of the pinnacle, especially if you're getting into manga specifically, and not just something you're tattling around on the TV screen or just dipping your toes into. It's like as soon as you fully dive into the manga industry, you're most likely going to read these three to some sort of degree, or at least one of them. So I started off with Naruto, was able to read that weekly going into, I think, the third quarter mark of the story into the finale, and I enjoyed it. Naruto is a great experience for people wanting to get into the industry, starting to read manga. It seems very overwhelming, hindsight is 2020, but taking that dive into any of these series, not just Naruto, is a great place to start for like your first big thing, because it gives you a bit of everything. It gives you what the manga industry was like and what was popular back in the late 90s, early 2000s, but also how it transforms and adapts to the more recent times. And all three of these series do it in their own very special way, which makes them stand out. It's not a matter of who's the most successful. They each provide a very different experience from a pretty close to same era, if you will. Bleach, I believe, came a little bit later in years, the early 2000s, I think. But even between those small handful of years, what it provided was entirely different. Something that feels feels almost modern in comparison to One Piece and Naruto, which with its approach to storytelling and how its character is a lot older and a lot more emotional and methodical in its approach, which was kind of weird in that era of magazine because they obviously wanted to appeal to younger children, and having a younger main character that they could grow with would make a lot more sense. But Ichigo having the mindset and the emotional stability of like a 15 to 17-year-old was odd at the time. One Piece was super expansive in its world setting and kind of adding so many different elements that just overwhelms you at first but becomes super addicting. So they each had their core attributes, you know, the core pillars of Weekly Shonen Jump, the big three. And then obviously to couple to that, Dragon Ball, which is infamous and predates all of these, and then Hunter x Hunter alongside of it as well, or Yu Yu Hakusho, I should probably say, but Hunter x Hunter as well. I would say for me personally now, looking back on these series, the experience and where they sit in comparison to where I am mentally and emotionally now and the newer literature that I've read from the manga industry, I can respect and value what they've done, but I personally enjoy in it or indulge within series that are completely different from it. And it's perfectly fine if people love these series through and through till this day, but none of these series are in my hypothetical top 10. I don't have a top 10, by the way. I just have series that I really enjoy. I don't really have a list in general. I'm not really the type of person that cares for keeping lists, but these three series don't really do anything for me anymore. But I value what they offer. I value the legacy that they have and how they've shaped and molded the industry in such a massive and climatic way. So moving on, this isn't necessarily a question, but more so a bit of information in regards to creating videos and whatnot. So you should add more clips from manga that you're discussing, add some panels, something like that. I feel like you're sad while you're talking, but that's your style and we respect it. Still love the vid. Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would absolutely love to add manga panels. In fact, around about 6 months to 8 months ago, I created a full 1-minute sample of just using all of these different manga panels in a way so creatively that I would have loved to implement onto the channel. Even over the years, I used manga panels on the side or within the background to play around with different ideas and how I would add so much motion and animation and all of these different things to manga panels. The creativity that I have with them is immenseful, and I would absolutely love to use them. The issue, the big issue, the problem, fair use is not bulletproof, and the only way that you can use manga panels is by relying on that fair use. Even if I cut up, animate, and recolor that manga panel, there is still a high probability chance that whoever owns that series, the company, the organization, will snipe me from YouTube. They'll hit me with a copyright strike. Might not sound all too bad, but let's say that you get comfortable with this. Some videos do extremely well and you start making it a common thing, and over 6 months you create some of the best videos that haven't been touched by companies, when suddenly one day they snipe all of them, and before you know it, 30 to 50 odd videos have copyright strikes and your channel is on track to be terminated, and there's nothing that you can do about it. That is a fear that I have, because fair use is not bulletproof. It doesn't give you a clean slate to just do whatever you want, because companies can pick it apart, because not only do they have the money to do so, they have the lawyers to do so, they have the information, they have the knowledge. Plus, some companies are just bullies. Let's not talk about people posting manga panels from One Piece, of all series, the most successful series on this planet, on Twitter, and getting copyright striked and DMCA'd and smashed by a litany of companies relating to it. This is just genuine people that aren't making money off it. They're just showing their love and appreciation on Twitter, cutting out or showing a manga panel. Now, that's not to say that everyone's going to get smited for it, but a lot of people have lost their accounts because of it. They're not making money on Twitter. People are making full-fledged videos on One Piece using manga panels, making a lot of money. The chances of them getting completely obliterated by a very big company is like 50-50. Probably not that, but there's a lot of different variations for it, a lot of different pros and cons, and I for one do not want to deal with that type of stress and anxiety, knowing that any moment my videos could be obliterated by a company that either has way too much money, an ego complex, or just wants to be a bully to people that are trying to make a living or trying to create something out of nothing. Fair use is odd, and it changes drastically from country to country, from Australia to America to Japan, where a lot of us are obviously using the material from. So I would love to use manga panels, but unfortunately I can't. I stick to specific marketing material because not only does fair use cover that, but also it is marketing material, meaning it's public domained and owned basically, and you can use it pretty freely. When it comes to the weird whiteout drawing stuff that I've been doing recently, that is me completely redrawing the manga panel. That is the length that I go through just so I'd avoid copyright completely, because that's me completely recreating it. And then I put it in like a nice little border whiteout box with some janky looking drawing version of the manga panel, which I try to replicate as close as possible, but obviously because there's so much detail in some of them, it's just impossible to do. But that's really fun to do. The only problem with that is that it's time consuming, and obviously I don't have the flexibility of just manipulating a manga panel to whatever degree. In terms of my style, that is honestly just a reflection of myself. It may definitely sound moody or depressing. Some people may find it calming. Some people may absolutely hate it. That's perfectly fine. I don't enjoy talking at a loud volume. I don't want to scream into the mic or have this real high octane energy because I'm not that type of person. I don't want to put on some fake front to be more entertaining or to be more lively. Why would I go through that effort of being someone that I'm not when I can weaponize my own strength, when I can weaponize how I feel, a reflection of myself, and turn it into something more atmospheric, something more soothing and darker and a little bit sinister or a little bit brooding in that design. A lot of people can hate it because it does feel depressing, and I completely understand. I'm just enjoying the type of content I want to make, and if I want to use really obnoxious, melodramatic pianos that sound like it's harmonizing demons within the background, by all means I will use that to emphasize what I'm talking about, to create a very tonally different video. Moving on, I wonder what Sufferents thinks of Devil May Cry. I have a weird history with Devil May Cry. I remember bits and pieces of it because I kind of grew up with the series and kind of fell in love with Dante and Nero, I believe his name was, and I enjoyed everything about it. Couldn't tell you anything about the story though, other than like the two main characters, and like I think Nero had something wrong with his arm, and then Dante always had the dual pistols and the big demon sword thing and like the red coat. I remember playing them when I was a lot younger, and I think I always liked the dynamic between Dante and Nero. Unfortunately, at this point, the hack and slash games don't really do all too much for me. They're great games, but I didn't really have all too much fun going around and trying to pull off really long combos on like juggling demons or something within the air. That was a playstyle back in the day that I really liked and enjoyed, but now not entirely all too much. Completely open to it if I fall in love with the story, but if I can't get past the story hurdle and it's a little bit back and forth maybe, I'll probably tend to avoid it. But Devil May Cry, from what I remember, I really loved when I was younger, and wasn't there movies or TV shows for it as well? I feel like there was some sort of project like that. I can't remember what it was though, but I know there's like a cult following for Devil May Cry, and I 100% see the appeal for it, most definitely. Great video. I don't even really care about your content, but it's cool to just hear your random thoughts. That's a really backhanded compliment, but thank you. As for questions, what's your favorite movie? Or alternatively, what's your favorite anime movie? Or what's your least favorite live action adaptation of an anime? Favorite movie? Quite the loaded question. Off the top of my head, this is gonna sound really weird, and I have a conversation for it. I have context. But my favorite movie, something that I just really loved every minute of, Nightcrawler. Jake Gyllenhaal. A lot of you know that I'm a Jake Gyllenhaal fanatic. I love the dark movies that he plays. Donnie Darko, right? Classic. But Nightcrawler, I love the idea. I love the setting. Jake Gyllenhaal's an incredible actor and just brought that movie to life. Recently, favorite movie, Jungle Cruise with Emily Blunt, I believe her name was, the incredible woman from A Quiet Place. And then obviously you have Dwayne Johnson or The Rock and Jack Whitehall, I believe his name is. I have like a guilty pleasure for The Rock films. I don't know why. They're not the best thing to ever exist, but I feel like I just have a fun time indulging within them. And for Jungle Cruise's sake, which is very new, that trio is just wholesome. It's just a fun movie time, something you don't have to take serious and you can kind of just put on within the background, but you'll probably get some laugh and enjoyment out of it. And I can see why people would hate it. You know, if you go into it all serious, it's probably not going to be the best thing. Favorite anime movie, I would say Ponyo, Spirited Away, Silent Voice is really good, Princess Momonoke, Mononoke, Akira, just classics. Don't get me wrong, the newer stuff I really enjoy. Silent Voice, Your Name, Weathering with You, pretty much anything by Makoto Shinkai is really nice. Least favorite live action of anime though? Ooh, that's kind of there's a lot. There's an endless amount. I'm trying to think of one that just really does not work. See, I tend to avoid live actions of anime, to be honest. There's not really all too many I want to watch. I think I watched the Tokyo Ghoul one and that was fine. Like, it was good. I wouldn't say it was the best thing ever, but definitely wasn't the worst. I honestly think I mentally block them out. I don't even think I can answer that question. I apologize, but I mentally block out stuff that has live actions for their anime. I didn't watch the Attack on Titan one. I heard bad things about that. I think Kingdom has a live action which is supposedly good. Didn't watch that. I don't really think I watch all too many, and if I do, I block them out completely. But moving on to the final question. What makes the perfect manga for you? This is quite the loaded question, and I've been thinking about this for somewhat the entire recording of this video. I don't really know what makes the perfect manga for me, to be honest. Because if I think about what makes something perfect, which mind you is completely subjective to everyone, your value is entirely different. But if I think of like a perfect concept or a perfect character or a perfect interaction or a perfect fight, whatever it may be, something with perfect in front of it. If I think of that and apply it to a story, it kind of takes away the unfolding experience. Does that make sense? If I know something is conceptually perfect from the beginning, which is hard to tell because, hindsight 2020 once again, but if it's using a concept that maybe has to be used a specific type of way or is going to be tweaked like this or played upon like this, you can kind of see where stories tend to go just by analyzing that said literature. It's not the most difficult thing to do, but not a lot of people like to do it because they don't want to kind of fall into this mindset of this is going to happen and this is going to happen and then being disappointed that they called it out. Cohesive ties are a normal thing within stories. Characters living or dying, red flags popping up, character arcs coming to an end or opening into something else, the highs and lows of storytelling. These are all normal things within writing, and there's ways to look at it so you can see it a lot more easier and obviously come to know what to expect. So when you add in concepts or themes or tones or atmospheres, any sort of structure or fundamental design that goes into storytelling, the perfect manga is one that you do not expect to be perfect. That's probably the best way I can put it for myself. The perfect manga for me is one that takes me by surprise and that I do not expect to fall in love with. The best example I can give is The Horizon. I will find any excuse to talk about this manga, or manhwa, sorry, it's Korean, but I absolutely adore and love that manhwa through and through. The thing is that it's not a perfect manga. It's not the perfect example of literature or how things should be written or how characters should be approached or how emotions should be portrayed. But it has so much heart and soul poured into it in such a very specific way. The author not only has the audacity to write it the way they did, but showcase it the way they did. They knew exactly what they were doing writing The Horizon, to break your soul, to break your emotions, to make you feel for these children in a war-torn country. That may sound easy to write because children, emotions, and a war-torn country just sounds like a very hard time to be alive within. But I will tell you now, balancing those emotions, making them believable and having those kids feel and experience the world around them is the most difficult thing that you could think about writing. Such authentic and realistic emotion. That is the most difficult thing, not to mention paying respect to the things that you're talking about at the exact same time, because it does tackle some very hard-hitting topics, some very harsh and real topics. It is so easy and so effortlessly simple to completely ruin that in any singular step direction that you take that is unplanned. If you are not pin perfect accurate in the style of storytelling that you want to tell, it will not work. That is the reason why Oyasumi Punpun, for example, which is another manga that I would consider perfect, is such an acquired taste, but also the pinnacle of manga storytelling. Ino Asano, the author of Oyasumi Punpun, is called a prodigy within Japan because of that work, and the amount of emotion, how he portrays it, how it reflects real life, real tragedy, real trauma, real depression, all of these real world feelings is such an accurate reflection within that manga. So it hits very close to home for people that have experienced those things, and it's a very difficult story to try and write. It's very difficult to portray those emotions. Not every author can do it. Not every author even wants to attempt to do it. And that's why they avoid writing stories like Oesumi Punpun. That's why they avoid writing stories about the horizon, especially children, which is even more difficult because of how complex the children mindset is and how quick it grows and adapts and conforms to its surroundings, to these emotions. I've completely blown this question in an entirely different direction, but hopefully that gives you a decent understanding on what I consider the perfect manga is, what I value, what I respect, and why it's so difficult to write those type of manga. That is what makes a perfect manga for me, experiencing those and falling in love with it. So with all of that being said, we are at the end of the video. I hope you all are sleeping well. Maybe you've already clicked off. Maybe you are having a nice little nap. Maybe you're working out. Maybe you're mowing your lawn. Maybe you're doing whatever you're doing. Homework, schoolwork, work, whatever it may be. I hope you're having a good day, night, morning, whatever it may be. Eat well, drink plenty of water. I appreciate you all, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.